¿Sabían que 2 meses antes de que se encontrara el primer caso de coronavirus en Wuhan, China, Bill Gates financió en Nueva York un evento, una simulación para enfrentar una pandemia mundial de un coronavirus? En serio, no les estoy mintiendo. Y aquí tengo el video del resumen de este evento. Vamos a verlos juntos y vamos a reaccionar juntos porque es increíble. Porque lo que vamos a ver, repito, es un evento en Nueva York y la respuesta que deberían tomar o que están ahí empezando a discutir cómo tomar. Y fueron 2 meses antes, fue en octubre del 2019 que se realizó se llama Evento 201, y hablan del coronavirus. O sea, no lo puedo creer. Y tantas cosas que hay ahorita de teoría de conspiración en torno a Bill Gates. Pero esto, repito, se dio 2 meses antes. Y vamos a verlos juntos, porque este es el resumen de este escenario, un simulacro sobre una pandemia de un coronavirus. O sea, no lo puedo creer. Vamos a verlo. Este es el resumen y vamos a empezar a reaccionar sobre esto.
It began in healthy-looking pigs, months, perhaps years ago. A new coronavirus spread silently within herds.
O sea, en la simulación están agarrando que un nuevo coronavirus, ojo, entró a través de cerdos. Pero es un coronavirus. Hay tanto tipo de virus, pero no están hablando de influenza, ni de VIH, del coronavirus. Fíjense.
Gradually, farmers started getting sick. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care. Many died.
Y así le llamaron en este simulacro a este virus, el CAPS, el coronavirus, ¿no? El síndrome del coronavirus por neumonía. ¡Wow! O sea, no puedo creerlo. Repito, son 2 meses antes. Se les ocurrió a ellos poner un coronavirus como si fuera el virus que iba a, pues bueno, a pegarle al mundo. Exactamente lo mismo. Bueno, vamos a ver qué sigue.
Experts agree unless it is quickly controlled, it could lead to a severe pandemic, an outbreak that circles the globe and affects people everywhere.
En este caso, el virus arrancó en Brasil, ¿no? En el caso de la simulación, no en China, pero bueno.
The mission of the Pandemic Emergency Board is to provide recommendations to deal with the major global challenges arising in response to an unfolding pandemic. The board is comprised of highly experienced leaders from business, public health, and civil society.
We could be looking at double the number of cases in 1 week and 16 times as many in a month if we are not able to stop the spread. That would be on the order of 500,000 cases.
Y miren, en este simulacro hecho en octubre, ahí está, 18 de octubre de 2019, aparecen, ¿no? Por ejemplo, estas gráficas que hemos visto ya ahorita muy comunes, ¿no? De crecimiento exponencial, etcétera, etcétera. ¡Wow! Ya lo están preparando todo.
It would continue to rise exponentially. In 3 months, we could be approaching 10 million cases.
We're at the start of what's looking like it will be a severe pandemic. And there are problems emerging that can only be solved by global business and governments working together.
We have known about CAPS-like viruses in animals and people for decades, but have not been successful at developing a licensed vaccine. And sure, there are new technologies that may help, but it's going to be difficult. I am not optimistic about having a vaccine in time to be relevant during this pandemic.
No va a haber vacuna, precisamente en la actual pandemia real.
So the policy crisis in question for this board in this meeting is this. How should governments, business, and international organizations allocate and distribute pandemic antivirals and medical supplies to the people who need them most?
Precisamente el tema actual, cómo distribuir ventiladores mecánicos y respiradores, ¿no?
What we've seen work very well in the HIV field is, in fact, procurement through the Global Fund. So having a centralized mechanism, so financially able to procure on behalf of affected countries would be critical. I think the second thing is it's going to be very important that for the business sector, for manufacturers of antivirals, that we have clarity around what the need is and where the need is and who are making the decisions.
I think that given that the countries most affected are those that are low and middle income countries with unequal access to technology, to finances, the UN has a worldwide footprint, universally recognized, and universal membership.
A global stockpile would certainly help ensure.
Es interesante porque la ONU debería de, ¿no?, realmente controlar esto. Esa es la propuesta que hizo el presidente mexicano ante la ONU, que ya se aprobó. La verdad es que, sin embargo, honestamente, las potencias no lo van a hacer caso de la ONU, pero bueno.
More rational and strategic allocation, but the reality is that we don't have the logistics capability, even within the UN, to bring that together in one place and run it. So this is where I think a collaboration between the international organizations like the World Health Organization and the private sector, which runs these supply chains for many purposes every day. Understand where the supplies are, make smart decisions about how to allocate them to the people who need them in the places that need them the most, and then work with the industry to move those supplies from where they are today to where they need to be.
Just to underscore the point that cooperation.
Lo que pasó, sin embargo, ahorita es que vemos que los países empezaron a prohibir la exportación. Fueron realmente más que los gobiernos, que los grandes corporativos los que generaron tanto problema, ¿no? Porque y los grandes corporativos eran los que querían mandarle. Aquí sí vimos que los gobiernos se vieron mucho peor que las grandes empresas, honestamente.
Among supply chain providers or businesses that have huge supply chains can add a lot of efficiency to the whole process.
The question is, can you, through this international mechanism, really promote commitments to doing this as quickly as possible and give people a sense that actually if they contribute more, that they will have a better chance of protecting their own populations and their country's security and health.
So to be completely clear, most of this production would already be committed in contracts.
Yes.
It is almost unheard of that people are producing product without having a forward commitment for the consumption of that product. So the first thing that needs to be done, because this is not something that the countries currently control, unless countries are going to bring about emergency situations and co-opt an existing supply chain.
I think it's not likely, I agree, that countries are not going to buy countermeasure to put into a global supply without retaining a large portion of it for themselves.
Eso es lo que pasó precisamente, ¿no? Los países acabaron agandallándose de sus propias producciones, y en un caso Estados Unidos está pirateándose y robándose producciones de otros países. Repito, esto es un simulacro que se realizó 2 meses antes de lo de Wuhan, ¿eh? O sea, nada más para tener claro cuándo salió todo esto que hicieron.
Public health agencies have issued travel advisories, while some countries have banned travel from the worst affected areas. As a result, the travel sector is taking a huge hit. Travel bookings are down 45%, and many flights have been canceled. A ripple effect is racing through the service sector. Governments that rely on travel and tourism as a large part of their economies are being hit particularly hard.
O sea, eso sí sucedió, ¿no? Todo eso que comentó la conductora, falsa, claro, este es un simulacro, sucedió.
How should national leaders, businesses, and international organizations balance the risk of worsening disease that would be caused by the continued movement of people around the world against the risks of profound economic consequence of travel and trade bans?
If there's some sense that there's a UN institution that can do all of this, then I worry we're suffering from a delusional disorder on the power of the UN. It's really important to get those industries and their trade associations and an efficient leadership established, which is decentralized, but has a collective responsibility and accountability. And that needs to be supported by the public leadership.
What is essential, what is non-essential travel, we have to clarify this. Otherwise, if we go down to 20% bookings over a long period, the company will run down. That's a fact.
You know, there's a whole complex set of issues in a highly interdependent world on supply chains that are just in time We need to think about how much flex there is in that just-in-time supply chain system and make sure it keeps running. I think it's going to take specificity, and it's going to take knowledge that only the private sector has. The UN can play an important coordinating facilitation role, but the companies know where those commodities are, where they move, how to move them, and that's where a type of public-private collaboration that we have not generally had in these crises needs to be put together pretty quickly.
Esto es interesante. Finalmente están hablando sobre las cadenas de suministro. Es algo que, por ejemplo, los Estados Unidos está empezando a presionar a México para que regresen las cadenas de suministro. En fin, vamos a seguir viendo este simulacro.
We are not out of money yet, but the fact is we are trending in a dangerous direction and something needs to change.
So the policy question for this board now is how should financial resources be prioritized? Are there nodes that we cannot allow to fail? What is your sense of priorities? We don't have money to pay for all of these urgent problems.
So at the moment, we want the funds, right? You need the money. So where's the money? So government kind of supplies some money. A lot of, private sectors, some are sitting here, you have some money. But now you need a really coordinated, centralized efforts.
Hotels will be experiencing, crippling losses doing that. And we know that the hotel business in itself makes up 5% of the GDP.
Governments need to be willing to do things that are out of their historical perspective, or for the most part, it's really a war footing that we need to be on.
We shouldn't underestimate the power of entrepreneurship. We need to escalate that, whether it's through the governments helping with tax breaks or subsidies of that nature to increase manufacturing of those types of products.
Es precisamente lo que hicieron la mayoría de los gobiernos, ¿no? Subsidios y recortes de impuestos.
It can happen quickly. A Marshall-type plan, don't mean to say that exactly, but a Marshall plan that can go into effect can stimulate change very quickly.
¿Qué es lo que quiso hacer Estados Unidos? O sea, que las fábricas se reconvirtieran, en lugar de ser vehículos, están siendo respiradores mecánicos.
Countries are reacting in different ways as to how best to manage the overwhelming amounts of dis and misinformation circulating over the internet. In some cases, limited internet shutdowns are being implemented to quell panic.
Wow. How much control of information should there be? And by whom? And how can false information be effectively challenged? And what if that false information is coming from companies or from governments?
I think it's very important that we make sure that there is concise communication with all healthcare facilities where these patients are being treated so that there isn't mass panic.
We're at a moment where the social media platforms have to step forward and recognize the moment to assert that they're a technology platform and not a broadcaster is over. They, in fact, have to be a participant in broadcasting accurate information and partnering with the scientific and health communities to counterweight, if not flood the zone of accurate information, because to put the genie back in the bottle of the misinformation and disinformation is nigh impossible.
One thing we haven't spoken about, and I'm wondering whether it's time to talk about this, is a step up from the part of the governments on enforcement actions against fake news.
I personally do not believe that trying to shut things down in terms of information is either practical or desirable. And we do have, I think, a couple of strategies that are available to us, one of which is the flood strategy, second of which is relying and informing and equipping trusted sources of information with the facts so they can then pass that on. But we also need to actually think about a technological answer to this.
Wow.
The outcome of the CAPS pandemic in Event 201 was catastrophic. 65 million people died in the first 18 months. The outbreak was small at first and initially seemed controllable, but then it started spreading in densely crowded and impoverished neighborhoods of megacities. From that point on, the spread of the disease was explosive. Within 6 months, cases were occurring in nearly every country. The global economy was in a free fall. The GDP down 11%. Stock markets around the world plummeted between 20 and 40% and headed into a downward cycle of fear and low expectation. Businesses were not borrowing, banks were not lending. Everyone was just hoping to hunker down and weather the storm. Economists say the economic turmoil caused by such a pandemic will last for years, perhaps a decade. The societal impacts, the loss of faith in government, the distrust of news, and the breakdown of social cohesion could last even longer. We have to ask, did this need to be so bad? Are there things we could have done in the 5 to 10 years leading up to the pandemic that would have lessened the catastrophic consequences? We believe the answer is yes. So, are we as a global community now finally ready to do the hard work needed to prepare for the next pandemic?
¡Wow! Y vean quién lo paga. Bill y Melinda Gates Foundation. ¡Caray! ¡Wow! ¡Wow! No lo puedo creer. Eso es increíble. Este es un simulacro, repito, 2 meses antes de cuando se encontró el primer caso del coronavirus en Wuhan, en China. O sea, ¿qué? ¿Estaban preparándose? ¿Viendo las opciones? Al final, muchas de estas cosas que dijeron los que estaban ahí en el panel se han tomado. Hasta llegado al extremo. Pero, o sea, es increíble esto, lo que estamos viendo, ¿no? Increíble, insólito. Un simulacro primero y después la vida real. Y si las comparamos, el simulacro y la vida real, pues está muy cerca, ¿no? Bueno, amigos y amigas, eso es todo por el día de hoy. Si te gustó este video, suscríbete, dale like para que más personas lo vean. Que tengas un buen día y nos vemos en el próximo video.